to order. To start off with, we'll do I'll do the attendance for committee members via roll call. So I'll read off your names, and if you're present, could you just identify yourself? Darwin Burkhart. All right. Mark Pitstick.
Here.
Jeff Schelke. Chris Schmidt.
I'm here.
Thanks. Chris Snyder.
Present.
Thank you. Jeff Schreiber.
Here.
All right. And Doug Ferguson, myself, present. Moving on to agenda changes and announcements. Just as a reminder, please mute yourself either through the app or the phone when you're not speaking. It just helps reduce the background noise. If you do have a question for myself or others on the call, please use the chat function. Staff are monitoring it. And for committee members, when making a motion, please state your name followed by the motion. That way we can properly identify it in the minutes. As a change from our last meeting, there was a change to the Open Meetings Act that now requires us to do a roll call vote for all votes. So we will be doing that something different versus just a yay or nay. And that, I don't think there's any other announcements. Oh, I almost forgot. James Gross, who's been assisting with the management of the CMAQ and TAP programs for the last few months, is actually going to be leaving CMAP. So for those people that maybe were reaching out to him with project changes, his last day will be at the end of next week. And so far there is no replacement. So with that, correspondence should be just sent to myself.
Doug?
Yes.
This is Chris Schmidt from IDOT. Jen Maddox's position hasn't changed at all, has it?
Jen has actually moved over into the LTA program.
Oh, okay.
CMAP, so she's
I must have missed that.
doing management. Yeah, that happened back in February.
Of course it did. All right, that's my mistake. Thank you.
Nope. So yes, if you're still sending anything to Jen, please don't. She's pretty good at passing along information, but
Oh, I'm sure.
It should be me.
Sure. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. So moving on to 3.0, approval of the minutes. Included in the materials for today's meeting were draft minutes from the April 3rd. If everybody's had a chance to review them, do I have a motion to approve?
This is Mark Pitstick, motion to approve.
Thank you.
Schmidt for the second.
Thank you. So in doing this a little bit different, are there any questions or changes before a vote? All right, so I'm just going to read down the list for the roll call. Darwin Burkhart. All right, Mark Pitstick.
Aye.
Chris Schmidt.
Aye.
Chris Snyder.
Aye.
Thank you. Jeff Schreiber.
Aye.
Thank you. All right, the minutes are approved. Well, Doug Ferguson, yes. Moving on to program monitoring. Included in your materials were the programming status sheets of both the active and deferred CMAQ projects, as well as the TAP-L projects. Are there any questions regarding those items? All right, hearing none. There was also included in the materials the obligations report. I am happy to state that we are so far have 47.3 million in obligations this year. We are a little bit off of our goal, which is the programming mark, but I don't think we'll probably end up a little bit short just due to the circumstances of delays with projects. But hopefully, we have approximately 81 million in advanced construction projects. So hopefully, a lot of those will start billing, and those will move to be converted, and we'll actually have obligations for those. Any questions on the obligation goal report? All right, hearing none. We'll move on to project changes. James, you want to handle those? I should add before James starts, to avoid having to do a roll call vote for each and every project change, as there are 16, I would like to just go through all the changes, and we can address any questions people have, but I would like to handle those as a single vote, with the motion representing whatever might be different from the staff recommendation. James?
All right. Good morning, everybody. So I will just run through all 18 project change requests we received, and I'll give a brief description of each, and then we can do the vote or questions or discussion at the end. So CMAP has received, since the last meeting, project change requests for 15 projects and a total of 18 project segments. First, for IDOT Jefferson Street at US 52 and I-55 southbound ramps, the sponsor is requesting a cost increase of 136,000 CMAQ for Phase 2 engineering in federal fiscal year 2020, due to the cost estimate now being higher than the original. For that project, the project ranking among all 2018 to 2022 intersection improvement projects would decrease from second to third. Next, the North Chicago Pace Bus Route Access Improvements Project. The sponsor is requesting a cost increase of 36,722 CMAQ for Phase 2 engineering in federal fiscal year 2020, and 48,403 CMAQ for construction and construction engineering in federal fiscal year 2021, as well as a schedule change to move Phase 2 engineering to 2021 and construction engineering to 2022, because the right-of-way acquisition will delay the schedule, and the cost increase is due to the inclusion of additional unanticipated pay items. And CMAQ is recommending approval of the requested cost increases and schedule change. Next, for Mundelein Metro Station at McKinley Avenue, the sponsor is requesting a transfer of 114,000 CMAQ from construction engineering to Phase 2 engineering, and a schedule change to move construction from 2020 to 2021, as well as a scope change to redesign the pedestrian bridge of the railroad due to safety concerns brought forward during project coordination with Metro. CMAP is approving the transfer as well as the schedule change and scope change, or recommending the approval. Next, for Lake County DOT, Butterfield Road from Allenton Road to IL 137 and Buckley Road, IL 137 Buckley Road. The sponsor is requesting a schedule change of construction and construction engineering from 2021 to 2020 in order to ensure the November 6th letting can be made. CMAQ is recommending approval of the schedule change. Next, Lake County DOT, Deerfield Road from Illinois 21 US 45, Milwaukee Avenue to Saunders Road. We have received project change requests for 4 segments of this project. First, at the segment of Milwaukee to Saunders Signal Interconnect, the sponsor is requesting a schedule change of construction engineering from 2022 to 2023 in order to match the segment schedule with other segments. For the new bicycle facility segment, the sponsor is requesting a transfer of $1,645,200 TAP from right-of-way to construction, since LCDOT is planning to use local funds to cover right-of-way in order to move into construction more quickly, as well as a schedule change of construction engineering from 2022 to 2023 in order to match the segment schedule with other segments. For the Saunders Road intersection improvement segment, the sponsor is requesting a transfer of $65,200 CMAQ from right-of-way to construction, since the sponsor is planning to use local funds in order to move the project into construction more quickly. And finally, for the segment of Milwaukee Avenue intersection improvement, the sponsor is requesting a transfer of $956,500 CMAQ from right-of-way to construction, since the sponsor is also planning to use local funds in order to move the project into construction more quickly. And CMAP staff recommends approval of all requested project changes to the project of Lake County Dot Deerfield Road from IL 21 Milwaukee Avenue to Saunders Road. Next, Aurora Edgelon Drive bikeway improvements. The sponsor is requesting a schedule change to move phase 2 engineering from federal fiscal year 2019 to 2020, and to move construction engineering from federal fiscal year 2020 to 2021 due to a delay in getting the executed phase 2 agreement. Staff recommends approval of the requested schedule changes. Next, Elgin Central Business District. The sponsor is requesting a transfer of 12,000 CMAQ from phase 2 engineering in federal fiscal year 2019 to construction engineering in 2020 in order to meet the goal of installing the bike racks in 2020. Staff recommends approval of the requested changes. Next is IDOT Illinois 53 from Hobson Road to 83rd Street. The sponsor is requesting a transfer of 21,600 CMAQ from phase 2 engineering to construction, as well as a schedule change to move construction from federal fiscal year 2022 to 2021 in order to target a letting in 2021 concurrent with other projects on the same contract. Staff recommends approval of the requested changes. Next, Forest Preserve District of DuPage, the West Branch DuPage River Trail connection. The sponsor is requesting a transfer of 80,000 TAP from right-of-way to phase 2 engineering, as well as an additional cost increase of 49,000 TAP in order to bring federal funding back up to 80% of phase 2 engineering cost, which has exceeded the initial estimate. Staff recommends approval of the requested transfer and cost increase. Next, Bensonville, Illinois Route 83 multi-use path. The sponsor is requesting a cost increase of 512,000 CMAQ for construction engineering in order to cover additional design constraints and a reduced amount of STP funds. That's in federal fiscal year 2020. With the requested changes, this project the project ranking among all 2016 to 2020 bicycle projects would decrease from 3rd to 11th. There were 4 projects ranking lower than this project at the new total that were still funded. And staff recommends approval of the cost increase of as requested for this project. Next is Elmhurst, Illinois 56 Butterfield Road at York Street intersection improvements. The sponsor is requesting a transfer of 30,349 CMAQ from construction to phase 1 engineering, reinstatement of phase 1 engineering in 2020, and a scope change. Staff recommends approval of the transfer of the transfer from construction to phase 1 engineering, reinstatement of phase 1 engineering, and the scope change as submitted. Next is IDOT Wolf Road from Brook Hill Road to 187th Street. The sponsor is requesting a transfer of 24,000 CMAQ from phase 2 engineering to construction, as well as a schedule change to move construction from federal fiscal year 2022 to 2021 in order to target a letting in 2021 concurrent with other projects on the same contract. Staff recommends approval of the transfer as requested, as well as the schedule change. Next is IDOT Chicago Avenue from 5th Avenue to 9th Avenue and Lake Street from 9th Avenue to 19th Avenue. The sponsor is requesting a transfer of 23,200 CMAQ from phase 2 engineering to construction, as well as a schedule change to move construction from 2022 to 2021, also in order to target a letting in federal fiscal year 2021 concurrent with other projects on the same contract. Staff also recommends approval of the schedule change as well as the transfer. Next is Chicago Ridge, Ridgeland Avenue access to transit. The sponsor is requesting a cost increase of 402,866 CMAQ for construction engineering in federal fiscal year 2020 due to costs higher than initially anticipated in design. Staff recommends approval of the requested cost increase. And finally, Schaumburg, Algonquin Road from Plum Grove Road to Illinois Route 53. The sponsor is requesting cost increases of 280,000 CMAQ for right-of-way in 2018 and 3,345,553 CMAQ for construction engineering in federal fiscal year 2020 due to additional costs of construction engineering, and project special waste costs above the initial estimate. With the requested changes, the project ranking among all 2016 to 2020 intersection improvement projects decreases from 7th to 12th. The new project ranking dropped it below 2 unfunded projects in the 2016-2020 cycle. CMAQ staff is recommending consideration of the cost increases as requested for this project. And that is the last one.
Thank you, James. I would like, before we start into questions, to go back to the cost change for the North Chicago bus route improvement, access improvements, sorry. The sponsor was requesting also a cost increase for construction and construction engineering, but that was in 2022. So at this point in time, staff, the recommendation is for approval of the phase 2 engineering, but tabling the request for construction increase due to the fact that with phase 2, the final plans and specs might change the ultimate cost, and we try to avoid doing cost increases multiple times. So looking out at 2022, it may be needed that the project might need additional funds at that point in time. So with that, I'd like to open up the floor to questions from the committee.
Yeah, Doug, let me just follow up on that one you just mentioned. I understand the thought process on that. This is Mark Pitstick from RTA. Is that consistent with what we're doing on other projects or have done in the past?
Yeah, when we're looking out beyond a year, we tend not to fund cost increases just due to the fact that it could change in the time frame, and then the project's coming back for another additional cost increase for construction. It just reduces. I know some sponsors get a little worried that, like, well, that might mean the money's not going to be there. Understanding that staff will do everything in our power to move forward a project that's ready to go.
Okay.
This is Brian Carlson with IDOT. I'd like to add that that same situation also exists for our first project presented, the US 52 at I-55. We have a construction cost change for federal fiscal year 22 that is not being considered at this time. It will be considered later on as we get closer to completion of phase 2 plans.
Okay, thanks, Brian. That's it on that project. I have comment on another project if nobody else has something on that, North Chicago. Any other comments on that one? Okay, my other question is about the Mundaline project. I know that they've been to us several times for various changes, scope changes, the cost changes. I understand the gist of the change now that, Metro didn't want everyone accessing that pedestrian bridge to have to go through get on the platform first. So I understand that. And they're changing the engineering cost a little bit. They're increasing that, but they don't anticipate the changes to the construction cost after they revise that. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem. Are there any other questions or comments from the committee concerning the requests? I would add that with the last one for Schaumburg, we only recommended consideration of that and not approval. It's generally been the policy of the committee when projects drop below unfunded projects that with the scoring rank that a little bit more questions arise about that. I would add that the two projects that were unfunded that year, one of them was Cook County's application for the I-294 interchange with Franklin Green Street. That project, while not funded in its entirety, was funded in later rounds for improvements on Franklin and Green Street for increased traffic along there. And then the other project was in McHenry County. It was an intersection improvement project that was later not funded with CMAQ funds, but picked up by McHenry County as part of an overall corridor project. So while it's passing those two projects weren't necessarily unfunded by other funds.
Yeah, Doug, this is Brian. Just a comment on the Schaumburg project. IDOT has been supportive of that project, and we've committed to the non-federal match for that project, and we've committed to Schaumburg that if they did receive the increase in the CMAQ funding, that we would also commit to increasing our share of the non-federal for the match on that. And I'd also like to add that that is actually based on the bid amounts. That contract has gone to letting and they have received bids. So that's not actually an estimate, but that's actually a bid amount.
Okay, thank you, Brian.
Doug, just a question on that one is that's a fairly high increase of 3 million or so. Is there sufficient budget? That's not a problem for the budget?
No, when you look at the table at the beginning of the memo, it does show that a negative unprogrammed balance. But I would add that the reason for that is with the use, by using advanced construction when projects are approved, we're not actually with the advanced construction reducing the overall obligation amount. So we're always kind of playing a game of trying to keep one step ahead for the future. So right now, as I mentioned earlier, there's $81 million in advanced construction for CMAQ and 31 for TAP. So until those get converted, we're still kind of, it doesn't come off our federal balance with FHWA. That being said, there's also, so we want to keep projects moving forward to keep building that AC amount so that when they do get converted, it'll come off the balance.
Okay.
Doug, this is Chris Snyder.
Yeah.
Back to the Schaumburg project. I guess I'm just curious the timing of such a large increase. Brian, you mentioned it was as bid. Does that mean this is $3 million over the engineer's estimate, or was this recognized earlier on but deferred to coming to our group until we had a bid to make sure the number was accurate?
Well, Chris, as a project led through the Bureau of Local Roads and Streets, I don't have access to engineers' estimates, so I can't answer that question. Maybe if somebody from Schaumburg or their representative is on the line, they could answer that question.
Yeah, do we have anybody from Schaumburg participating in today's meeting? Don't forget to unmute yourself if you are trying to talk.
Yes, I'm Scott Casper with Chastain and Associates, and I'm hired to help coordinate the project. And I'll do is defer to Dave Block with Trans Systems. He can kind of give an update of the estimate. The project was bid, I think, was at 15% over, so it's not the entire $3 million. But Dave, if you can give a little detail on that.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Scott. And I think, Chris, to answer your question, I think you characterized it correctly, that it is not $3 million in addition to our estimate. Our estimate was $8.5 million, and the bid price came in at about 9.8. A pretty significant difference there. But this had been building over lots of things that the project encumbered by over the last year, and so yes, it became a decision at some point to wait till the bid came in to see where we stand with things. So the $3 million deficiency was something, lots of factors wrapped up into that. Not the least of which we were not able to tap back into our STU funding, which was also a major source of funding for the project too, and that became kind of an untouchable source. So if that answers it.
Thank you for that update. Are there any other questions about the costs or change requests that were made? All right, hearing none. Do I have a motion for approval of the staff recommended changes?
Motion Snyder.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
This is Chris Schmidt. I'll second that.
Thank you. All right. With that, I'll go down the list of committee members. Darwin Burkhart. Mark Pitstick.
Aye.
Jeff Schelke. Chris Schmidt.
Aye.
Chris Schneider.
Aye.
And Jeff Schreiber.
Aye.
And finally, myself, Doug Ferguson. Aye.
Jeff Schelke, I was getting myself unmuted here.
Not a problem, Mayor. How do you vote?
I vote aye.
Thank you. All right. Cost changes or project changes are approved. Moving on to item 6.0, the program development for the 2022 to 2024 program. At the end of the last call, there were a couple of different items that were brought up for discussion, and I would like to spend some time discussing those, along with some potential changes that staff is recommending for the next call, and really get input from the committee as we move forward. So there were a couple of different areas of interest that were identified. One was concerning the intersection improvement projects and kind of the analysis that was being done for those, and Staff did spend some time reviewing the micro simulation that we conduct. We didn't find any systematic errors that were involved in that. But when looking at the projects, we did notice that for those that were selected for funding, there were a couple different kind of project elements that really defined whether projects were selected or not. One was traffic volumes. Looking at the traffic volumes for all the intersection improvement projects, those with higher traffic volumes tend to rank better in the emissions benefit area, but also cost was a factor as well. One of the areas with the intersection improvements were specifically the roundabout projects. When looking at those, we noticed that traffic volumes tended to not be very high on those projects, but those projects, because they were reconstructing entire intersections, tended to be higher than the average intersection improvement project. So with that, I just want to see if anybody has any comments. There was a memo that kind of went through what we looked at when doing that, included with today's materials. Any committee members have any comments in those areas or additional questions of staff? All right, hearing none, we can all, oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry, this is Chris Schmidt. Yeah, I got a chance to look over the memo. I appreciate the work of CMAQ staff to put that together. Just sort of a clerical error. I think it's 2022 to 2026.
You are
maybe
correct.
I might be wrong on that. It spells it out in the memo, but the title of it was different. I'd say all the changes seem pretty reasonable. I think if anything, transit saw a bigger change. The direct emissions, being that I work with the railroad portion of that and sort of help to work with the other, like IEPA's plan and City of Chicago's projects, I think benefit to sensitive population is a good place to put those figures. I understand the reasoning with sort of the double counting of PM. So that all sounds good. I think the only thing that I had questions about is it very clearly spells out the weighting of emission reduction, cost benefit 60 points, the TIC scoring getting 30 points, and then inclusive growth score of 10. I guess I would wonder what was the breakdown then when we still had the RSP in the ranking. I tried to look back at historical stuff back in 18. There was a couple of full packets that didn't have the, according to the agenda, it said there was a staff presentation, and I couldn't find that presentation in the archived packets. So it'd be interesting to see what that number looked like. I mean, it says 10%, I get that, but you know, obviously if you add those numbers up as you have it now, that equals to 100 points. But if 10 points were going to regionally significant projects, then the total score last cycle, was it actually 110 points potential, or was it weighted differently? Just probably the only thing that I would have concern about, or just would like to see. And then last thing, I know I'm rambling, the inclusion of greenhouse gas emissions I think is great. There's potential that might be something that, at least for our program, CMAQ, when they start to do a reevaluation of the performance measures, may be something we need to capture for the CMAQ performance measures. So I think getting a historical preference is really going to, a historical precedence of what these projects and the reduction looks like is going to help us better come up with a goal in the future if that were to come to pass.
Yeah, so I will say that some of your questions, as I go through my presentation further, I think I'm going to answer those.
Okay.
So sure. Hold on to those. With the intersection improvement projects, I will say that we are evaluating the input module worksheet that we use to collect information on the proposed projects. We'll try to make sure that we're collecting the correct information and removing potential confusion by applicants on that. With regard to intersection improvement projects, are there any other additional questions or discussion that's wanted by any of the committee members? I know Chris and Tom, you had you had some comments initially when we were discussing the wrap up of last year. So I just want to make sure that you have a chance to chime in.
Yeah, I'll say I think at least what I was doing when we talked about it, I think we're talking about the intersection improvement topic was being kind of reflected based on comments from Lake County, in terms of some of the projects they've submitted and maybe not scored as well. And I think we were just kind of conveying as the county representatives kind of their concerns, question about the methodology, and they are constructing and continue to construct roundabouts, but they don't seem to score well. So I think Lake County's represented. I'll defer to anybody here that might want, well, I'll ask Doug, to maybe defer if Lake County has any comments, or let them have that offline with CMAP staff.
Yeah, and we're more than willing to sit down with them and discuss it. Is there somebody from Lake County on the call that maybe would like to comment? I see Mike there.
Yeah, I'll just say that I think this does help us understand a little bit comparing it to intersection projects that were ranked. I think that helps us get a little bit better understanding of why these projects. Some of them we do have some idea. We're understanding, but we have some other projects that we're converting four-way stops to roundabouts where you're not slowing down the main line, where we had some questions. But I think this does help answer some of those. We'll take a look, and if there are still some specific concerns, we'll reach out offline. But this is definitely helpful for us.
Great, thanks. So are there any other, before I move on to total project cost, any other additional comments or discussion? All right, with total project cost, there was some at least potential confusion related to when we asked for total project cost with the applications, what we're asking for. So we do ask for the cost of all phases involved in an application or a project, but sometimes projects that are submitted for consideration are part of a larger, bigger project. And I think what it comes down to is if the application project has independent utility and does not, it's not required that we consider all the other costs that are part of the larger project. We only need the costs related to the project, the application project. And sometimes that requires that for right-of-way acquisition and engineering, that estimates be made on what those costs are for the application project. But we are willing to, talk with applicants if there's concern if it's based upon the percentage of the application project cost versus the larger total project cost. We can work that out. Is there any additional questions on that? And we will try to improve the language that's part of the application booklet to make that clearer to applicants. All right, hearing none, I'm going to move along here. The project scoring. So I think this is what Chris was asking for. The breakdown for how projects were scored was based upon emissions reduction cost benefit was 60 points. Transportation impact criteria scoring was 30 points, and then the regional priorities equaled 10 points. So it was a total of 100 points. Specifically with the regional priorities, there were three different areas that we gave points for under the regional priorities, and each one could generate a total of 10 points. But the weighting for regional priorities was capped at 10. So it didn't matter if you got 10 in all three different areas, you would be capped at only getting 10 points. So what staff is proposing are some changes to the way to the regional priorities, and specifically kind of dropping the whole regional priority category. And with that, we would eliminate the regionally significant project points. With the regionally significant projects, we found that we would tend to get only 1 or 2 projects that would score in that area. And because of their regional nature, those projects tended to score well already in other areas. So we don't necessarily feel that we need to signal those projects out to give them additional points. We would like to create a standalone inclusive growth score, so that the inclusive growth score would play a larger role in the scoring of projects. And then we would like to move what was referred to as the transit supportive land use, move that into the transportation impact criteria for transit projects. And I think for some of the transit projects, that could be a potential bonus for them, where they might have gotten good scoring in inclusive growth and transit supportive land use. They would be capped at 10 and potentially be seeing a loss of scoring points in that area. So with that, I would like to talk about this a little bit and get the input of the committee on how you feel about making this change to the regional priorities.
This is Chris again. It's probably clear, but I made the mistake of that one of the 3 potential categories for the regional projects was the inclusive growth, and now you're just making that standalone.
That's correct.
So, thank you.
Doug, can you remind us how you evaluate inclusive growth? And
right. So looking at not just like areas that would seem to be economically disconnected, because sometimes projects in economically disconnected areas don't always benefit those individuals that reside in that area. We really focused on the users of the system. So we looked at individuals below the poverty line that were also people of color. So that's what, and we modeled that information using our regional transportation model for both transit and highways to look at the users of those facilities. So we were measuring it based upon improvements to the facility and then what the users, the percentage of users that fell within that facility.
okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Doug, this is Dave Tomzik.
Yeah.
Question on the land use. How does that apply to because operations can be funded through CMAQ. How would that apply for a service that is being funded for operations?
Well, it may not generate much from an operations standpoint, just because if you're opening up a new station or looking at potentially operating service for new, say, bus stops, we could look at the land use around those facilities. Does that make sense? I'm not saying that it wouldn't potentially have problems, but it's hard to make sure that every project scores well in every single transportation impact criteria.
Yeah. No, I agree. I'm just in past thinking of how, like, for example, VAMPO program. How can that tie into land use? I mean, land use is critical and important, and the transit supportive development supports transit, which is a benefit. But there's just these nuances of with operations. And then also a question on the land use: is it the existing land use at the time, or is it that because of transit, the impact on future land use?
So it's actually looking at it. So it's not looking at projections of land use. It is actually based upon the existing and also the zoning. that's around that exists in the land use. So it does look at the potential.
So, for example, a metro station in, I'm just thinking of an example like Route 59 20 years ago when it was built. On metro station, there was no land around it. It was a cornfield. But if it was zoned for higher development land use, then that would help score it.
That's correct.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. And I will add that if people have additional questions or comments, I do invite the committee members and members in the audience to pass those along to staff. We're really trying to make sure that what we're doing here is in keeping with the committee structure and not getting away from it. And I understand sometimes when we're talking about these things, sometimes things don't always occur. So with that, I'm going to move on to the transportation impact criteria. This is how the current transit impact criteria is weighted. Last year, we made changes to the highway where we added the corridor transportation improvement program. This year, we're looking at making some changes with transit, as we were just discussing, with the transit supportive land use, and also the direct emissions reduction. And then also on the bicycle facility, but that is less about the weighting and more about some additional factors that we're considering. So with the transit, we would add the transit supportive land use criteria. It would be weighted at 10 points. And then the weighting for ridership and reliability or asset condition would be reduced from 15 to 10 for each of those. So, and just as a reminder, project scores for reliability if it's service related, and scores asset condition if it's facility related. Any comments on that before we move on? Questions? All right. I'll move on to with the bicycle TIC changes. So with the connective facility connectivity scoring, the way we've done it in the past is we scored projects based upon their connection to existing bikeways. But when we first proposed this, there was a concern that sometimes a proposed facility might not end connecting to an actual bikeway, but may connect into an area that is extremely bikeable anyways. So we had generated an either or type scoring. So it's either connecting to existing bikeways or looking at the pedestrian environment factor weighted by the land use diversity. We're proposing today to replace the pedestrian environment factor with a level of traffic stress. So level of traffic stress is scored on a 1 to 4 scale, 1 being less traffic stress and 4 being more. So we would look at the facilities, the roadway facilities that a bicycle facility is connecting into. It would, again, just like before, it would be an either or. Either we're looking at the connecting into existing facilities or the level of traffic stress. So a project, if it's using the level of traffic stress, it would score higher if it's closer to a 1 than versus a 4. So any comments or questions about this proposed change?
Doug,
Yeah.
This is Chris. Just curious on the LTS scoring.
Yeah.
You said it's based on the physical and operational characteristics of the roadway and volume. So I assume there's a standard out there, some metric. It's lane widths, number of lanes, speed of the roadway. Does all this?
Yep, that all factors in, and then additionally, also looking at traffic volumes as well.
Okay. Now, if if we're looking to build a separated facility, I assume the stress would then be because they're not in traffic. So does that mean that something like it would be like a 10?
Right. So we're
Like-
not right. So we're not about. So it's only on a. It only can go up to 4. The max score would be 4.99, and that's factoring in all the different elements. We're not measuring the level of traffic stress on the facility that's being proposed or what it's replacing. What we're scoring, we're looking at the termini of where the project starts or ends, making sure that you're not building a bicycle facility that's going to terminate at a 5-lane cross section with 4,000 ADT, 40,000 ADT, and like 45-mile-an-hour speed limits. Because where would the bicyclist go? Now, if there's an existing bike facility there, such as another trail that it's connecting into, then it would score points in that area and not based upon the level of traffic stress. Does that kind of answer the question?
Clear as mud.
So you're gonna assign points to on both scoring systems and then choose whichever one is higher.
Right.
Am I reading that right?
Yes, and that's currently what we do with the pedestrian environment factor and the connection to existing bikeways.
Okay, so effectively, the project could address one or the other or both of those measurement techniques or whatever,
Right.
and it'll get the better of the two. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we realize that not every bicycle facility like stops like where there's an existing bicycle facility, but it could very well end in a very like residential neighborhood where traffic volumes are low and conditions are very bikeable already. So we don't want to penalize projects like that.
Makes sense.
All right. So if there's no other questions or comments, I'm going to move on to direct emissions. We're proposing to drop the annual health benefits score that was part of the direct emissions TIC. The annual health benefits score was really directly tied to the total amount of particulate matter being eliminated. We felt that there was some scoring going on there since one of the emissions factors that we already use for calculating emissions benefits was the particulate matter. And we felt that the benefits to sensitive populations also captures PM concentrations as part of it, so that we just felt that just going back to the benefits for sensitive populations and increasing that scoring probably would serve us better as selecting projects that are really doing addressing PM to a greater degree. Any comments on that?
Yeah, it's really just a typo because your meeting notes are accurate, but the narrative says it would go to a total of 15 points. So it's going to go from 20 to 25.
Yes.
Okay.
Was that in the memo?
Yes, last sentence under 4 point, well, under 4, yeah. It says 15 points, and so I was confused on whether it's adding 15 points or what, but no. Your memos, your PowerPoint is accurate.
Yep, sorry about that. All right, so when considering all these changes, we would be looking at the current scoring would look like this. And you can see like with transit, it would be 10 points for the 3 different categories. And then the benefits to sensitive population would increase to 25. Any comments or questions on that right now? All right. So one of the other areas that we took a look at was making sure that we're addressing the need or helping out high need communities. We're already doing that with making the exemption for phase one engineering, but we felt that looking at what the STP shared fund is doing, that we could do more in this area. By supplying local match using transportation development credits. There already is based upon IDOT policies for transit, transit agencies are already accessing the transportation development credits. And this would open it up for those high need communities that we identify as cohort 4. This would also match it up with the shared fund, reducing potential confusion there. The shared fund in the last round only actually programmed 1.7 million in TDCs to use as match. When looking at the projects from the last round, there were 7 applications from communities that would qualify as cohort 4 communities. 3 of those were part of RTA's access to transit application process. And the total amount of those projects was $15.8 million. That being said, there was one significant project, the Burnham bicycle bridge over the railroad, that was made up 11 million of that. And the Burnham actually only requested funding for phase 1 engineering, but that makes up the majority of those costs. So while we do realize that it could potentially reduce the overall funding, the projects would still need to rank well in the other categories. Just because you qualify in this area does not mean that you would get some sort of priority as far as selection is concerned. It's just helping reduce the barrier that sometimes providing local match can be for some communities. Any comments or questions from the committee regarding this suggestion?
And Doug, for E1 to be funded, correct me if I'm wrong, is it gets you E1 so that you can still have to apply for future phases, but this allows the high need communities to actually get the first step done, which is phase 1 engineering?
Well, so this is more than, so we would still keep the phase 1 exception where high need communities are able to apply for E1. We only fund the project for E1 and make them require them to come back and apply once they've completed phase 1 for the remaining phases. But this would actually be providing the local match for those communities on their projects, whether it be E1 or potentially other future phases, phase 2 engineering, right-of-way acquisition, construction.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments on this? All right, last, so greenhouse gas emissions. Staff did take some time to look at the potentially including greenhouse gas emissions in the scoring of CMAQ projects. For those that may not have been paying attention, climate is a big part of the CMAP work plan for the coming, like probably next 5 years. So we wanted to look at, see if there was something that we could do with the CMAQ program. What we found was the emissions rates for greenhouse gas emissions and volatile organic compounds have a very similar curve. So projects that do well in volatile organic compounds are also doing well with gas emissions. So we didn't think it would add anything to the scoring and selection of projects, but we did felt that it would be good to highlight the greenhouse gas emission benefits that come from CMAQ projects. So our intent is to just provide the emissions reduction benefits that are included as part of the project rankings, but we're not proposing changing the scoring in any way with these. With that, any comments or questions in this area?
This is Chris Schmidt again from IDOT. I know I kind of jumped the gun and gave all my comments right at the beginning, but I appreciate this step. And like I said earlier, just to reiterate, this could become a performance measure in the future. And I commend Doug and the staff for starting to look at it.
Yes. Yeah, so for those that might not be familiar with the performance targets from USDOT, originally greenhouse gas emissions were going to be a performance target, but at the last minute when they were rolling out the targets, it was dropped. Based upon what we're hearing, there's a good chance that it could be revived and added back into the federal performance targets. So I think it's something that we need to be looking at as a region. And this is just a baby step towards that. All right. So with that, I don't have anything else in this area. If there's any last minute comments before we move on to other business.
Doug, this is Chris again. Is it your anticipation that we will vote on this at the next meeting? I was looking back at the 18 kind of series on how this went before the last round. There looked to be a couple of discussion meetings before the voting, I guess you could say. I didn't know if that, because this is a little bit less controversial, I might be over saying that, but is it your anticipation to vote next meeting, or would you have another discussion item on this?
So my intent is to bring back, based upon feedback that we received today and other potential feedback that we receive, a staff proposal for the scoring. I don't know if I'll give the entire application booklet, but definitely the section that covers how projects are evaluated with the changes, and ask for a vote. With that being said, if there are some areas that we as a committee cannot agree upon, I think it still gives us opportunity at the October meeting to make last minute changes prior to the call in January.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yep.
Doug, just a summary comment. I didn't have any areas of concern. I asked a couple questions. Some of the other folks asked questions that I had also on my mind, and those were addressed. So I'm comfortable moving forward on this.
Okay, great, thanks. All right, moving on to 7.0, other business. Is there any other business from the committee members? All right, hearing none. Public comment. Staff did not receive any public comments in advance of the meeting. I would ask that if there's anybody in the audience that wishes to address the committee, if you could just indicate so in the chat function. It can just be something just real quick, and I will, but please wait and I will call on you, and please unmute yourself. So is there anybody who wishes to address the committee? All right, not seeing anything, and we can always go back if someone doesn't get their hand up in a quick enough time. So our next meeting is scheduled for Thursday, September 3rd, 11 a.m., following the STP Project Selection Committee. With that, and I still haven't gotten any chats asking to make public comments. With that, I'll if the committee has no additional business, I will look for adjournment. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Any opposed? All right. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Doug.
Thanks, Doug.